Let's take a look at routing in our application. Our PS menu directive, which the end user is going to set up like so, this directive really shouldn't be too concerned with routing. And the reason why is that there are a bunch of different routers out there. There's the router that comes with Angular and Grout. Then there's UI Router, which is gaining popularity. And then the Angular 2.0 router is being backported to Angular 1.x. So our menu component should be able to work with any of those. And it should also work with any router coming out in the future. So we'll need a way to send messages from the menu to anyone else who cares to listen. But to get started now, let's take a look at what the end user should expect. When the user sets up an item, they specify the label, the icon, and we can also add an attribute for the route. So I'm specifying dashboard, locations, and guides. And for right now, all we really care about is the fact that these routes are strings. It's the user who will determine whether the route is, whether it's some kind of state for UI router, or some path address, something that would be used in ng-route, or whatever else may be coming down the line. But for now, we'll just pass in this route attribute, and we're going to need to save that in our isolate scope. I'll go to our PS menu item directive, and we'll grab the route. So we have our route. Now we need to do something when the user clicks on an item. So I'll go into our link function, and we'll add some code here. We want to take our element, and we'll call jQuery's on function. We want to handle the click event, and we'll specify a function being passed the event. We'll call event stop propagation and event prevent default. And that'll just give us exclusive access to this click event. It won't be propagated and the default action won't occur. Now to do something useful, we're going to need to take the route out of the scope and send that as a message somewhere. Now instead of putting any of that logic here in the menu item, let's use our menu controller. And we have access to our menu controller because we're requiring a PS menu, and the controller is being passed to our link function right here. So what I want to do is call that controller, but I want to wrap that in scope.apply. Since we're handling an event with jQuery, Angular is going to have no idea that our scope is going to be changing. So we have to let it know with this scope $apply. And the key changes are going to occur in the PS menu controller. So we don't have any functions set up yet, but we can call controller set active item, passing it the element, and we'll create this function soon. We'll also call controller set route, which we'll also create soon, and we'll pass it scope.route. So let's create set active item first. I'll go to the PS menu controller, and looking on the this object for the controller, we'll set the set active element property to a function that receives the element. And this will simply take our scope and set active element to the element. And this way, PS menu will keep control of which item within the menu is active. And only one item can be active at a time. The other function we need to create is set route, which accepts a route. Now this is where we're going to have to communicate outside of the PS menu control. And there are a bunch of different ways to communicate outside of it. One thing we could do is call the emit function. And that'll send a message up the scope chain all the way up to $root scope. We could get that to work in our case, but you have to remember that PS menu is a standalone component. And as an emit message gets broadcast up, there may be a listener in a whole different branch of the scope tree. So we can't use emit. We could use broadcast. That'll broadcast down from the $root scope. And we could also set up a service to handle this. The problem with the service is you would still need to implement some kind of pub sub publisher subscriber mechanism within the service. So I think the easiest thing to do here is to just use root scope, and we'll call broadcast on it. We're going to need a very unique message name. So let's call it PS menu item selected event. Hopefully that won't collide with anything else. And we can also pass it an object, and the property we need we can call route, and we'll pass it our route parameter. In earlier versions of Angular, broadcasting off of root scope was pretty inefficient. It would broadcast out to every scope on the page. But now it's streamlined. When a listener registers, the root scope will know exactly where to send that message. So there really isn't anywhere near the performance hit we've had before in earlier versions. So we'll broadcast out this message, and we're also going to need to listen to this message somewhere and pick up the route. And we'll listen for it in the framework. Now before we leave here, we need to make sure that we're actually injecting our root scope. Okay, so we're passing that in now. Let's take a look at our PS framework controller.js file. We can start adding code here. Let's take a look at our scope and call the on function. And we want to listen to that message saying an item was selected. So to be safe, we'll just copy and paste it. So we'll listen to that message, and when we receive it, we'll call a function that gets past the event and the data. So when an item gets selected, this is where we're going to have to actually do some real routing based upon one of the routers that we have available. And we'll cover that more in the future of this course. But for now, we just want to show the route. We'll just show it in the middle of the screen. We'll take our scope and we'll set a variable on it. I'll call it route string, and we'll set it to data.route. And let's just make sure we have that data correct. Looking at the PS menu controller, yes, we are calling it route. So for now, just to make things simple and to let us be able to test the menu, let's just show this within the template. I'll go to the PS framework template.html, and we have our big title bar section and our transcluded menu. And for testing purposes only, I'll add some markup here. So I'm creating a div, and the only purpose of this div is to show this route string. Later in this course, all of this is going to be replaced with widgets, but for now, let's just show the string. And I'm just going to put an inline style, and it'll show it absolutely at 220, 200, and it'll just be some red text. So let's just go ahead and run this and see if everything's set up okay. I'll click on dashboard, and we got stopped on our exception handler. So the exception is object doesn't support property or method set active item. So I probably named something wrong. If we look back at our controller, at our menu controller, I'm calling it set active element instead of set active item. So actually I'll go back into the menu item directive, and instead of calling set active item, I'll just call this set active element. And let's try running it now. So I clicked on dashboard and we got our dashboard string. I'll click on locations and we got a routing string of locations and guides for raft guides. So we don't have real routing set up yet, but we are sending messages outside of our PS menu. And we are able to set up subscribers to listen to those messages. And that's good enough for now.